I once bought a business that came with a dusty 3-ring binder and, believe it or not, a floppy disk. No systems, no real guidance, no playbook, just good luck, hope you figure it out. And before that, I built my first business completely from scratch with nothing wrote down at all and most of it just in my head. And those two experiences taught me a truth I didn't understand at the time. Most businesses, especially the ones bought through ETA, run on tribal knowledge, outdated SOPs, and a whole lot of guessing. And now, as a franchisor, I've seen the other side. A modern, well built playbook can be the difference between chaos and predictable success. Welcome to Entrepreneurship Through Franchising, a show about kicking down your cubicle wall with ETF and getting honest insights from the experts who guide franchise owners. Hey, I'm Ty, and on today's show, we're talking about one of the biggest differences between ETA and ETF that almost nobody sees coming, and that is the quality of the systems. Because when you're buying an existing business, you're often inheriting outdated documentation. But when you join a modern franchise, you're stepping into a proven model with a living playbook built for scale. And our guest is Bryan Garner, founder of Manual Makers, and he has spent years building operations manuals, training systems, and SOPs for brands across the country and in every sector. He knows exactly what separates strong modern franchisors from the ones who are still figuring out building it while they're flying in the sky. Bryan's work is focused on a problem every future owner should understand. Are you buying a business with real, repeatable systems, or a business held together by whoever has the most knowledge in the room? And today, he's going to help us learn how to spot the difference before you invest and how to validate that franchisor actually has the operational strength to set you up for success. Bryan, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Man, Bryan, we've had a lot of great conversations. You helped us professionalize our operations manual as an emerging brand, and so before we kind of dive into kind of what you've seen under the hood with all the franchises you've worked with, and I have no idea how many that is, but I think it's a lot. Can you kind of just tell us how you get to the place of being one of the go-to ops manual people in the space of franchising? How do you get here?
There's no college course for this. Uh, I started developing websites 30 years ago, 1995, and my first clients were franchise companies. So Planet Smoothie, Moe's, Southwest Grill, Shane's Rib Shack. I did a
Okay.
lot with that, and then I got hired on as those brands were getting started. So I became an FBC and I did local store marketing. So I grew up in a drugstore. My
Hold
parents,
on. FBC is a
well, I'm sorry, a franchise business consultant.
franchise business. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
They're the information brokers and your main support for a franchise, and they call them different things. I grew up in a drugstore, so small business was our thing, local store marketing, and that really was kind of my gig. So I did that for a long time. Been involved with franchise sales, franchise support, franchise marketing, and then also website development. So I managed delta.com for 10 years. And
Okay.
when I came back to this company, founded by my wife, we merged uh, content management system, which is how websites are managed, with franchise documentation. So I'm really a content strategist who happens to have a bunch of franchise experience. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I, it's a tough path
So
to follow.
how many, like, just, do you have any idea of how many operations manuals, and I think we'll get into, because operations manual is more than just a binder of a couple hundred pages, but how many operations manuals has your company produced?
Hundreds, hundreds.
Hundreds. Yeah.
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 And not just operations manuals, but then as you grow, as you mature, you've seen this too. You begin to target information because franchisees hire on people to do a specific thing. So there's a
Hmm.
marketing manual, there's a construction manual, there's a trainer's guide, a train the trainer's guide, all kinds of different targeted material that reuses content from the main ops manual.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Bryan, I think this is going to be a really valuable conversation. And if you're listening, you're wondering like what exactly, because you're not a franchisor, so you're not going to be hiring Bryan to do any work for you, unless you are a franchisor. Then I highly encourage it. But what you're going to be needing to do as you go through the discovery process is evaluate the level of support that you're going to be getting from that franchisor, and the operations manual, the ops manual is the foundation of that support. It is where that stuff is documented. So, Bryan, you've seen behind the curtain of countless businesses. Uh, what is the biggest value? You think about like if you're out there looking at buying a business versus franchise, explain how that operations manual really is kind of the thing that weights the franchise opportunity over buying an existing business that might be out there.
One of the biggest things I think is businesses are built by entrepreneurs and they overcome challenges and that's what an entrepreneur does. And when they've overcome the challenges, they're able to reap those rewards. So they've got a steady client base, they've got annually recurring revenue. Um, there's also some dumb luck that comes with that. And
I could
and
speak to that. Yeah.
yeah, and some hard knocks,
Uh
and
huh.
they've figured things out. So now you look at it and you see this pretty little package that is done, and you never really understand how they overcame certain challenges that you are about to face.
Hmm.
When you buy a business, when my folks bought their business, they went and worked in the drugstore for 30 days with them and learned all of the different processes. But have those processes been challenged? Have they been refined? And one of the things is you're the expert in your business and you've got this great idea. We're going to come in behind and challenge a lot of assumptions. That's great, but what's the KPI? How do you measure that? How do you go away on vacation for 3 weeks and leave your manager to do it in a way that meets your standards? And by asking those questions, we find a lot of people saying, oh, well, if we did it this way, if we made some adjustments, you buy a business, you will be the one making those adjustments.
Hmm.
With a franchise company, um, we've stress tested some of your SOPs and not just your SOPs. You started in your local business and then you sold to somebody in Columbus, Ohio, and you sold to somebody in Atlanta, Georgia. And the demographics may be slightly different. The makeup of the homes of the historic societies, and for a restaurant, that the restaurant has its own challenges with that. So a franchise of any given size has been through those different use cases and built scalable systems.
Hmm.
Um, and it's not just the operations; it's the infrastructure that goes along with it too.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think about my experience buying a business, I invested through a combination of cash and borrowing money, of course, $250,000, and it was the design was to be a vertical in the business I already owned, in the construction business I already owned. Uh, and to your point, like the entrepreneur, like it is a blessing and a curse because entrepreneurs are great at figuring things out, not often great at documenting them. So if you can set an entrepreneur down and you can extract all of that information out of them, it's a pretty amazing thing. But when I bought that business, I did the same thing your parents. Like I spent about a month, me and other people from my team working with his people that he was going to be kind of handing off and getting a good feel of things. But what we got for and we didn't get an operations man. What we got for like some SOPs was a dusty 3-ring binder and a floppy disk.
Yeah,
Because when you think about buying a boring business that regular person can afford, $250,000 or something, like that's what you're gonna get. But with a franchise, and specifically one that's working with that has worked with somebody like yourself, you're really getting something, to your point, that's been stress tested. And that when we engaged you, we had kind of worked with my sister, who was an educator, to kind of write our first iteration to get our first 3 or 4 franchises open. and they were kind of pinpointed across the U.S. And so, to your point, like we had learned, like we had a man in the van operator, we had a semi absentee operator, and we had an owner operator that had employees. And so we had kind of these different models, and then man, the questions, it's like you kind of forget, and this is one of the key factors when you're buying a business, is that the owner of that business that's selling it to you will make it seem like it's no big deal and you can learn it all in 30 days. But the amount of stuff that I forgot that I knew as we went through the process with you and Katie, like
Yeah.
I had all the answers, or a lot of the answers I had, but it was like, I never even thought to ask myself that question. Like I forgot how much I knew about my business,
Right.
uh,
There's a
which was such a critical part of going through the process.
one
And,
of the
and
one of the examples we use all the time is, and it's pretty popular now, but write down the instructions to tell somebody how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And you forget to tell them to pull a knife out of the drawer. You say,
right.
put some peanut butter on the bread. And, if somebody's following it, then they put their finger in.
Yeah.
And, the how much of the previous owner's success was due to the fact that they were an outgoing person who never met a stranger. Whereas you
Yeah.
come in and now it really is all about the operations. And anything that they've got documented or they taught you is only as big as they've grown it so far. They only know up to as good as they've been. How would they get bigger? And with you, with all of your different models and different territories, you've seen different things. So now you're able to help somebody get beyond the plateau to the next plateau. Great, you've done all the right things. Now let's go deeper.
Yeah, and that operations manual, the other thing it gives you, and you hinted at this earlier about the 3 weeks, you think about, why do we want to own businesses? I mean, one, because we want a value of life or a quality of life that comes with business ownership that you can't get through a job. The purpose, the sometimes, at least for me, the a more integrated life where, though I don't work less, I do spend more time with my family in a way that didn't exist with my previous career. But at the same time, there is an element, and it's probably a 50-50. Like, our generations are not promised, Gen X and millennials, we're not promised a whole lot when it comes to pensions and retirement funds. That's not a thing that really exists. And so, you know, business ownership is a pathway to building up my net worth, right? Like that's what I'm doing this for. And net worth is built through SOPs. Net worth is not built through, you might can, as an entrepreneur, you can get there a long ways with, halfway maybe, with character and grit and the ability to just go out and talk to anybody and not know a stranger. But you won't get net worth from that, because when you want to take off or when you want to sell, well, you can't sell it if you're the only thing about the business that makes it work. There's
Right.
no value in the business other than
Yeah.
you. So you just close it down when you're done, and hopefully you've made enough in that process. Or you won't really get quality of life because you can never take off, because all the information only exists with you. And
Right.
so that SOP, that ops manual, is what gives you quality of life and what gives you something that will help you build net worth. So let's make sure, we're talking about franchising. Okay, so franchises have ops manuals. Can you give us a high level understanding of what a typical franchise ops manual looks like?
Sure. Um, Ours are always, we break them into three parts. Other people kind of integrate these. Our three parts are, part A is uh, all of the things that any franchisee needs to know. It's, when do I pay royalties? How much are royalties? What do I get from my brand development fund? How much insurance should I have? What type of insurance should I have? Those kinds of things. What does construction look like? Part B is the day-to-day operations. And this is, you hit this point earlier. It's an SOP helps you avoid trading time for dollars. If it's
Mm-hmm.
always you, if it's always your time that you're being paid for, then you'll never be able to take time off. You'll never be able to have someone else run the business and have that supplement your income in retirement or whatever. So that's what part B is. And with an SOP, every business is different as to what the content model looks like, but every SOP should have the same elements for that type of business. So an example would be, what is the policy? Why is it important? Who does it? When do they do it? How often do they do it? What are the steps for doing it? What are the resources for learning how to do it better or more or scalable? How do I know when it's been done right? Those 7 or 8 elements should be a part of every single SOP. And if they're not, then you're leaving it out by choice and not because you forgot to put it in. So we use a content model. Some people call it a template. It's not really, but that's okay. It helps them to not only internalize it, but then to teach it. And to your point earlier, where you get like a big old dusty manual, it's dusty. Useful information gets used. And when somebody asks you what time it is and you tell them how to make a watch, they're going to lose interest really early. Um,
Yeah.
People don't read to know, they read to do. Tell me how to do what was step 4 again? Excuse me. And that's why, videos are great. They're great for demonstrating how to do things, but they're not really referenceable for somebody who sort of remembers, but what's that middle thing? And the two
Yeah.
together worked really well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the like as we were going through the process of writing our ops manual, I was really just kind of blown away because to your point, and kind of going back to the making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, is that like what is step 3? Because a business is complicated. That like middle step that we forget, get the knife out of the drawer. That is the step when you think about whether it's a restaurant or it's a home healthcare or it's a home service. That is the part that you want to be able to grab. And a lot of your manuals now, right? So you think, and most people I think are probably thinking when you think of a manual, you're thinking of like a a spiral bound thing or something like that that you get when you sign up for a franchise. But that's not really in today's world what you're getting. Most of your clients that you work with, Brian, or maybe all of them, uh, yeah, they get a PDF version, and I guess they could spiral bound it if they want. But what does the manual really look like in the real world, and how is the modern manual used
Yeah.
differently?
Well, where we've come from is the 600-page gorilla that's in a 3-ring binder that's used as a doorstop. And
Right?
and the most common complaint that we hear is no one ever reads my manual. And
Yeah.
but why don't people read your manual? And one reason is because they've got to flip to page 312 to find out what step 3 is. And
Right.
past all of the royalties are drafted on the 12th and all that other stuff. So there's too much more
Mm-hmm.
often than not. Another reason is that they're poorly written. Another one is that they wrote it in 2020 and never updated it. So I mean, we have large franchises coming back to us, hey, can you redo this? And there are still fax instructions and fax numbers and yellow page advertising
Yeah.
types of things. I take one look at that as a prospective franchisee or as a franchisee and automatically discount the rest of the document. You've lost all credibility. Therefore, I'm going to search by email. I'm going to email my FBC. I'm going to call the accounting person. And now you're talking one-to-one again, but a manual enables you to talk one-to-many. And
That's right.
that's the true benefit of it. So if people can't self-serve the information, then why have it
Mm-hmm.
in the first place? So in the old days, it was a 600-page gorilla, and it was a show up and throw up kind of thing. Here's everything that somebody might need, somebody might want to know, and they don't. Who wants to know it? When do they want to know it? And HTML is a much better search mechanism
Mm-hmm.
than flipping through pages. It,
Right.
it also gives you the opportunity to target a little bit better. So surfacing the right information to the right people at the right time is what content strategy is. Um, HTML enables people to do that, but also in this modern world of platforms and technology, the real purpose of an ops manual is to tie back into the franchise agreement, because the franchise agreement says you as a franchisee are responsible for X, Y, and Z. We're going to tell you how to do X, Y, and Z. That might be through a vendor. It might be through a resource, a Google Drive or a Dropbox where we've got resources. It might be through a Monday.com where we manage the project of a store build out. It might be any one of a number of other platforms that we have. That's what a tech stack is, and every
Hmm.
franchise has one these days. Um, so why repeat the information? So a modern manual is going to take the requirements from the franchise agreement and point to the resources. It really becomes an information broker. And it's the first stop for the franchisees to know what is expected of them, what the measurement is, what the requirement is, and where the resources are. And then the flip side's also true. You have made promises to the franchisee, and this documents when it's going to happen, who's going to do it. We have a right to visit your unit 4 times per year. Okay. Do you just show up? No, we call you beforehand. And this is our promise to you. We're going to call you. We're going to tell you what we're going to evaluate you on. We're going to come out and work with you. We're also going to spend some time in the field with you, and we're going to take you to dinner because it's a relationship, not,
Hmm.
we're not trying to catch you being bad. It's an open book test.
Yeah. Yeah. And these modern manuals, they're web based, right? Like, so, and ours is this way. And I think, a lot of franchisors is this way, where you can open up the website, log in, or however you get to it, and you can search that topic. So whatever topic it is that you want to search, you can search it. And I do love, so one thing I always talk about in our franchise, and not every franchise is this way, but I think a lot of franchises, I call it a built together business. The idea of it is that the franchise agreement and the FDD exists to lift us all up, that it exists to keep the brand together and give us big business power, big company power, but local ownership. And when we're working together, we really elevate all of us. So when one wins, we all win. However, when one gets distracted or goes the other way, away from the brand, we all lose. And that is what that franchise agreement is there for. And what is really great about manuals like yours is they help us all, they help keep us all in the same place, fighting the same battle, trying to win the same war. And that's such an important piece of these types of manuals.
It really important. That I'm going to tie that back to something that you said earlier about the difference between buying a business and buying a franchise. When you buy a business, you bought that previous owner's credibility, and you sort of borrowed it, and now you've got to gain your own credibility. When you buy a
Right.
franchise, you're buying the brand's credibility, and the franchise agreement helps to set the boundaries of that. But
That's right.
but also beyond that, like later you're going to ask me about red flags and green flags. Um, a green flag is a franchisor who knows that it's a new business in a new territory, possibly in a new region, right? Cold weather is different than hot weather. The coastal is different than interior, whatever that happens to be, is that they've allowed for a process for when we don't know. What
That's
does
right.
what does a variance look like? We've never experienced this before, but here's the process so that we can figure it out together.
Hmm.
Because a franchisee is an entrepreneur. When they encounter a business problem, they want to solve the business problem. They'll ask you first, and if you don't have an answer to that or a process for figuring out the answer, they will solve it themselves in a way that's good for them, which is
Hmm.
fine, but not scalable. Having the processes does a couple of things. One is it says, what happens if, because terminal uniqueness is a thing. People in my area don't like that, right? You'll hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but the other is that it really kind of builds trust in that we are in this together. And that's a great problem to have. Let's come over here to Sacramento, where Bob has also encountered that problem. Here's how he solved it. It really kind of makes it more like an ecosystem instead of a top down, here are rules.
That when they are done right, that is exactly what it is. So I'm a person, I'm out there, I'm evaluating a franchise. We're just talking about how important this ops manual is and how critical it is to your success, how it is the foundation of what you're investing into. Uh, but it's also protected. So it's protected through a lot of confidentiality, and you only get to see the full thing after you sign off on the
Good
dotted
sign.
line and you paid your franchise fees and all of that. So it's not like I can actually read it before I sign up, but there are some signals, there are some disclosures that happen that will help give me some insight. So, Bryan, from your experience, what are some things I can do during the discovery process to make sure that the franchisor has really thoughtfully considered this important thing and didn't just because what many people on this call may not, or this podcast may not be aware of, is there are uh, other actors in the space that Bryan said it's not a template. His is not a template because it is not. It's a map. It's just kind of a there's a lot that goes into work with it. Bryan met with our team for days, and his team met with our team for days. But there are people who just like put it in a, and you can buy a template, I think, on somewhere on the internet for like $100. Uh, how do I know that this person thoughtfully worked through this and didn't just buy one of these generic templates and I sign up and I realize uh, I don't really have the information I need and I can't search it?
Oh, the, I mean, how do you know the best way, honestly, is, and I think that a lot of prospective franchisees overlook this, is you should have access to existing franchisees to call them. And it's the questions that you ask those folks that will help you with this. One of which is, what are your three most critical KPIs and how are they measured? And um, the franchisee will probably tell you how they do it, but then you can ask the follow-up question is this systemic? Is this a thing? Then also, what does the franchisor do to help you improve those KPIs? So if cost of goods sold is a thing, then what do national contracts look like? Or am I on the hook for purchasing from local vendors all the time? Um, Marketing is an example of that. What does the infrastructure look like? The brand development fund pays for branding, and there's a glossy Facebook and digital advertising buy, um, but your branding, um, for the entire company. What happens if I in Atlanta want to highlight some work that I did in Grant Park? What happens if in Columbus, Ohio, I want to talk about the things we did for the city of Worthington or down in German Village, um, to give some local accent to that? How do I, as a franchisee, purchase that? And in some cases, really, you're on your own and you send it to us for approval.
Mm-hmm.
Asking the franchisees, how do you get more of? How do you feel supported in this? What did your grand opening plan look like, and how involved was the franchisor with it? If they've thought through the grand opening plan, if they have a way that takes the franchisor out of it, that the franchisee can simply call a vendor, and this may be kind of a little bit of a shibboleth as well, a little bit of a tell, is if I ask you for something, do you already have pricing? And if you do, it's because you've seen these use cases before. You have the forethought to package it together.
Mm-hmm.
You know what it's going to take, and now the vendor does a lot of your compliance for you. You don't really need to worry about the approval process. If that exists, then there's an infrastructure behind that has required thought. And that's true for food vendors. It's true for, you guys kit out a vehicle
Mm-hmm.
beforehand. You've thought that stuff through, and that shows an attention to detail.
Yeah, and that is such a great point when you're doing validation and you're asking these questions. There are clear answers. In another interview, I interviewed Wade with Riker Insurance, who I think insurance being a huge challenge for any business, but specifically home service business like we operate. Insurance is critical. It's also very complicated business insurance, and there are a lot of challenges around it. When we were early on, I just made this general assumption that like what I could get in Oklahoma was going to be the same everywhere else. Uh, When our third franchise opened up in Florida, I realized that that was not the case, and the vehicle I had chosen was double the cost in insurance in that area because of a number of different factors. But uh, you realize, hey, this is a thing. We need to address this for the franchises. I think that the other thing that you could probably find in validation, Brian, I'd be interested in your opinion on this, is how consistent the answer is. So if you talk to three current franchisees and you ask them what's the marketing, how do you get leads, that you want to hear the same answer, because that goes to the operational process of the business.
That's a great point, and how well it was communicated out to them as well. Um, if you're talking about I realize you're home based, but um, the how often does the franchisor update the ops manual? Do you,
Yeah.
I mean, that you can send an update to me anytime you want. We fix that, we publish it online. But usually when we're making those types of changes, they're tweaks and little
Hmm.
improvements, and they affect, you know, revenue, safety, legality, right? Those are the things that we want to make right away. But if somebody is continually changing the interior sign package, they're updating the menu, they're changing the FF&E, you've got a new vehicle all the time. It means that they've learned something with each new franchisee, which is good, but it also means that uh, I started to use an inappropriate term. It also means that maybe not all of their ducks are in a row,
Right.
and you as the franchisee, I mean, at first you're like, yeah, this is for the good of the brand, and then, three changes in, uh, what are we doing here? Why are we making all these changes this soon? And it happens a lot if you've got fewer than 10 franchisees, but but it shouldn't happen beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so understanding how often they're changing, understanding what their like, that's such a, and asking those questions during validation. I think this is the thing that comes up in everyone I've spoken to on this podcast is validation, validation, validation. Talk to other owners. That is something that you do not get if you buy an existing business, unless it's an existing franchise. But if you're just buying some, I don't know, construction company or some restaurant that somebody owns, some mom and pop, you don't get to call anybody else really and find out. You don't get to dig into the details and make sure that it's working. Uh, so let's dive into some red flags. So we talk about the things that you're hearing during validation. What would be some big red flags that would make you hit pause, ask additional questions, really dive in, or maybe even run?
You had a great point of inconsistent answers. Uh, Consistency is key. I mean, you're buying a franchise. Another one might be there's no real community. Do franchisees have a chance to talk to each other, to work out some of their? I'm having a labor problem, like I'm an attitude problem, and that's not even a franchisor problem, but it's the
Hmm.
ability to talk to other franchisees and work through similar problems. Does a community exist? Another thing is we see a lot of very first time franchisors coming in with rules. They've got a lot of rules. And I'm a big fan of brand standards and KPIs and measurable metrics, but every rule has to be enforced or else it's not a rule. The example that I may have even used this with you is an HOA in Texas had a rule that you had to mow your lawn, and a guy didn't mow his lawn, and he got letter after letter, and eventually they called the police, and eventually there was an armed standoff, and eventually they killed the guy. Now, that is a very extreme example, but are you going to take the franchise away if somebody's got a dirty uniform? And so where do you live with the rules? So rules are great, but you also have to give the why. And if you don't give the why, then the rule is somewhat meaningless. So we say that you might have a rule that every lead that comes in must be followed up within 24 business hours. as an example. Well, the why of that is because anything longer and they may go to competition, they may get cold, they may have found another solution, their neighbor may have decided to do it for them or whatever. You begin to see that the KPI is in the close rate. So from lead to customer, if that is a low percentage, then you're going to start looking at, all right, how soon after the lead came in did you contact? So that's the why. Not That's the why for the rule. The rule is
Hmm.
the flip side to compliance is success. And I never want to go into a unit and say you didn't follow this rule. I'm going to say, though, that doing this task is an input to success. It also happens to be a rule. Um, so if there are a lot of rules without a lot of whys, you're probably going to wind up with a top-down approach, um, which will cause friction at some point on some topic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, you want to have brand standards, and I say this, and I don't mean this to put down franchisees, but I do as a franchisor. I look at this a lot like having adult children, right? Like, so we want to be independent, and but we have values, right? And I want my own children and my friend, like, we're about values, not about rules, and so the rules exist to create guardrails within our value system. So it is very clear when we're living outside of our values. But I think that's the thing when you're meeting with a franchisor, you're going through the discovery process is to identify if they have, is it values driven or rules driven or neither. Neither would also be a red flag.
yes, it would. Yeah.
Because that might just be somebody who's just in a hurry to get a franchise sold, and they're more focused on selling franchises rather than building a business for everybody. So yeah, and that goes back to culture, right? It is within the culture of the business. Are there any rules that, and of course, don't name the brand, but are there any rules where you've come across and you've been like, that is not only crazy, but unenforceable?
Yeah. So when you started that question, I wasn't sure I would have an example, but I do. Excuse me. That 3 days a week country music must be played, and 2 days a week it must be Christian music.
So I'm
Okay.
guessing obviously it's a restaurant. It's a home service company.
No, no, it's not. It's not a restaurant.
Oh,
So
it's not a
that
restaurant. I can
no,
just
that
imagine like making our techs drive around and like while you're in your car, 3 days a week in your car, you're listening to this. We're
right.
controlling your radio.
It
Uh,
I suppose it could be enforced if you mandated the vendor and the equipment and you controlled it centrally, which has happened.
so like Starbucks, I used to work at when I was in college. I worked at Target, which had a Starbucks attached to it,
Oh,
and
right.
Starbucks has their own like radio thing. And also, I worked at a grocery store when I was in high school, and they had their own like radio channel that played nonstop, and it was the worst music. It was miserable. That in that way you could control it, but yeah.
Yeah. It I'm hard pressed right now. We usually game this out for people. Let's play this out to a different demographic, to a different location, to what I mean, real life variables. I mean, operations are a circle and you start in the center and there are at least 360 different
Uh-huh.
ways to get to the outside. So getting to the outside is the standard and sometimes you don't really care how they achieve something. And I think a lot of the rules come in you must turn this 3 times clockwise. Well, maybe you just turn it clockwise until it doesn't need turning any longer and that could be okay. But if you enforce the 3 turn part, and that's usually where the rules come in, and usually people realize that okay, that's just me. I'd be okay with whatever. So almost always we talk people out of it. And enforceability is the other part of it. I mean,
Yeah.
who's gonna know, right?
So, you've seen under the hood of all different types of and helped write manuals for all different types of brands. I'm guessing just like really probably if you can think of it in franchising, you guys might have put together a manual from restaurants to home health care to home service. Uh, when you think about all of these manuals that you've put together, what is the most important part in your mind that for a franchisee in these manuals? What's the single most important part?
Culture.
Culture.
Yeah. Part A gives an opportunity to introduce your philosophy to business, and your value system. And
Mm-hmm.
we asked for your values and put those in. So often you get caught up in the making money part of it and forget that uh, that your tone of voice, whether or not you're jocular,
Mm-hmm.
some are hyper professional, and others are, um, I work with a very large worldwide brand, and one of their values is don't be a jerk, and it's actually not jerk. It's a word that I probably shouldn't be saying here, and that's a worldwide brand that uses that word in their ops manual, and their tone of voice flows through it. Somebody once told me that the Catholic Church is one of the world's largest franchises. And when they asked a local priest or a cardinal how he gets the priest to follow the rules, he says, we teach them to love God and then to do what they think is right. And it's very similar for you. We teach you to be passionate about the service that you're offering, the why. These are our neighbors. We improve their lives. We do all kinds of things for the community. We need you to embody that, and then that will direct whether or not you upcharge somebody when you really should be giving them a lanyard, or that becomes the culture and that becomes the brand. And culture, to me, also means sometimes we're wrong, and we'll figure out a way to get past that. Sometimes we don't have the answers, but we'll work with you to get them. So that comes through in what does your approval process look like? What does your support system look like? Culture hits everything that has to do with both success and compliance. And then also the relationship, and whether or not, when you're going through validation, whether or not the franchisees are going to speak highly of you, or call me on a different line and I'll tell you the real scoop.
The one outside of validation, the only other insight that a franchisee, a candidate going through discovery, really has to the ops manual is the table of contents that they have to publish inside their FDD. I believe it's an exhibit that usually follows the primary, like immediately following like the primary, like 22 items, and it has to be in there. Is there anything related to culture or professionalism or anything that when I look at that, I can see, or the ones that you've produced, can I see values in the table of contents?
Yeah. Yeah, we have values in that. Uh, Mission, vision, and values is usually one of our big sections. I don't know that you can tell by looking at the table of contents that an SOP is missing, because the structure of it might be that this SOP is a sub-process to another procedure. So it may be included and you don't really know just from the TOC, table of contents. Sorry, I slip into acronyms. You know, but having a mission, vision, and values, having a a se- a, a clear approval process, and I know that I come back to that a lot, but as you're building, you probably don't have a stress tested infrastructure. And and this is true of really big companies too. Again, I'm going to go back to I can't give their name, but they are worldwide, and they are starting to be in other countries, and they use the words "this must be approved." Great. How do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
And they looked at each other. I'm not sure. How the goal here is to teach you how to win, not to come in with a stick or a ruler and smack the back of their hand. Knowing that things change and it's business, things should change. Everything should change and grow. Your business plan relies on you changing and growing. How do we enable change and growth? Are we so rigid now for today? Is this a snapshot and my competition's going to bypass us because we haven't planned for change and growth? What does R&D look like? Um, what is that process? Is there a franchise advisory council? Um, you know, which isn't really elected, but at the same time, it still says that we value the input from our business owners, from our franchise partners, and that's in terms of the marketing. It's in terms of the R&D,
Mm-hmm.
of the rules that we put in place. Do you, as a franchisee, have some sort of representative giving that perspective?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think you can find that in the TOC.
You can't, when I was considering becoming a franchise, and I learned about this thing called the FDD, and I learned about what was supposed to be in it, and I thought about all the businesses that were kind of similar, at least in my mind, to ours, or ones I had heard about. And so I just started collecting all their FDDs, and I was like, well, what's supposed to be in an operations manual, right? I didn't know, because I'm thinking very tactical, strategic. It's all about how to do the work, which is part of it, but not all of it. And when I went to the table of contents in these ones, and I remember, I won't say one that was really bad, but I could tell very quickly that it was a photocopy of a photocopy. It was even like kind of crooked. Like, I was like, wow, this is fun. You should be able to produce something better than that. That seems really off.
Looks like a
Uh,
ransom note.
It's like that looked like that 3-ring binder that I got. But then I do remember very clearly, because I'm a huge How I Built This fan, and I had listened to the 1-800-GOT-JUNK episode, so Brian Scudamore, and I was like, well, this guy sounds awesome. Sounds like he's very culture driven, very values driven. And then I looked at their table of contents, and to your point, you could see culture in the table of contents. You could see mission, values, those types of things were in the first section. And then you could see just the way that it talked about everything else. You could see that there was culture behind it. You could see that the customer was important, and you could see the franchisee was important, just in the way that they like had titled the sections, right? That like you could see that there was a strong culture in that brand, which was it's indicative of that business and of that founder. But you can find it inside the ops manual. I believe you guys have done a great job doing that for us. Last question I'm going to ask you is just one piece of advice. Someone's out there right now, they're considering buying a business. Your family has done it. You and your wife run a business together. Uh, what's the one piece of advice you'd give somebody out there?
Know your why, I think.
Yeah.
Um, Again, I cut my teeth on local store marketing. So the Guerrilla Marketing Handbook by J. Conrad Levinson, I read that when I was in high school. And shaking hands, kissing babies matters. Um, the thing that we used to try to teach our restaurant franchisees is number one, you are the brand. My dad used to say, love me, love my product, love me first, then you will love my product. Be the mayor of your village.
Uh-huh.
And all of these mean the same thing. Um, and a thing that I learned early on is if you care about what your customers care about first, they'll care about whether or not you succeed. So you see a lot of folks on Facebook or wherever saying, "Hey guys, listen, we're really struggling here. We need you to come in this weekend." And the community rallies behind them, but you need them to care about that before there's a problem. And if you support the local high school band and you support the restoration efforts and you support the fundraising efforts of the fire station, or that's being a part of the community. And if you care about the community will care about you. And and I think so many people get caught up in the P&L and there's a good margin here and this looks like the business has legs, and all of that doesn't matter if you don't really love being in business and loving the why.
Man,
So
that's so good.
yeah,
Yeah, if everybody who's thinking about franchising or buying a business will take that. I've shared before that business ownership is hard. It doesn't matter how good the business is or how great the opportunity is. It is hard. There are dark days and dark nights, and you're gonna stress about things, and some days are gonna be really tough. If you are doing those things that Bryan just said, if you have that why, you will get up in the morning after that rough day, and you'll be excited to go make a difference in your community and to make an impact in your community. So that's what it's all about. Bryan, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to talk with us all, to give us your expert advice. If somebody out here is thinking about buying a franchise, there's not a whole lot of reason for them to reach out to you, but there are people here that are listening that might be franchise brokers working with brands that don't have great ops manuals, or there might be another franchisor who's thinking it's time to get an update. Bryan, for those individuals, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, great question. Thank you. So, two answers to that. For anybody who's in the franchise business, manualmakers.com has all the information that you need. You can reach out to me by email, but you're not going to remember it if I say it here. So, but manualmakers.com. But the other side of this is that franchisors, franchisees, every business has to maintain their info, whether it's through Google Drive or Dropbox or naming conventions, and finding information in your own life is difficult. So we've got a podcast called Beyond the Manual, and you can find that on YouTube, where we talk about some of it's franchisor based, some of it's just business ownership based. But it gets beyond the operations manual and gets it create, publish, and manage. How do you manage the documentation so that you can find it? Because if you can't find it, it doesn't exist. So Beyond the Manual, YouTube.
On YouTube? Okay.
On
Bryan, I'm going to
YouTube
make
or
sure
wherever you get your podcasts.
Wherever you get your podcasting, I'm going to definitely subscribe. Bryan, thank you so much for being on one of our very first episodes. I really appreciate your time. Have a great day, man. Thanks for listening to the show. Make sure you hit the follow button in your podcast app so you never miss another episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe before you go. And if you want to get connected with me, just find me on LinkedIn, search Ty McBride. Later.